Welcome to Madison City Channel's Know Your Candidates interviews, sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Dane County. I'm your interviewer, Brooke Soltwet, and I'd like to introduce Keith Furman, running for Alder from District 19. As we begin, please tell our viewers a bit about how your educational, vocational, and civic experience has prepared you for the position, and why you decided to run for Alder.
Sure, thank you. Thank you for having me, Brooke. I appreciate it. In August, I was appointed to the interim role of Alder in District 19 when Mark Clare resigned after 11 years. My background is in IT services, and so my most recent job was Chief Technology Officer and Chief Strategy Officer for a healthcare IT company here in Madison. And in that position, I had to make a lot of budget decisions as well as decisions with not that many resources to get the job done. So a lot of my private experience in the professional world with that job as well as IT consulting that I did previously really set me up to address some of the issues you deal with as Alder. As far as public experience, I was the chairman of the planning board in Hoboken, New Jersey, and that gave me a lot of exposure to working with the public and the different aspects that are involved in that.
Great. Madison's efforts to address chronic homelessness have appeared to fall short, especially with regard to providing sufficient support systems for a housing-first approach. What ideas do you have that might create greater success for projects such as the one on Tree Lane?
Sure, and so the council recently addressed some of that, and I was part of a compromise. I think the important thing to look at with Housing First is implementing it properly. I do think it's very important for us to be implementing Housing First in Madison. It's far cheaper for us to have initiatives like Housing First than dealing with the side effects of homelessness. But I think what's important is for us to have the appropriate level of support services. When you look at Milwaukee, there was an example recently in the paper. Milwaukee has a Housing First building similar size to ours, and they spent something around $680,000 a year in support services. Now, it wasn't just the city of Milwaukee that did that, it was partners. Here in Madison, we were spending up until recently about $180,000 a year, and so we definitely need to be spending a lot more on support services to provide the necessary support for people going through that transition from being on the streets to housing. Recently, the City Council did pass a measure to add additional support services, and I was just involved in a compromise that helped to add additional personnel to make the building more secure. And so what we did is we added funding to allow for 24/7 receptionist that can help with security guard that's on duty. So there are 2 people on site almost all the time, but the front desk would always be covered by somebody that would be trauma informed as well as conflict de-escalation trained, and partner with the residents to make that more of a secure and a home for those residents.
Thank you. The Madison Police Department has been faulted for not having appropriate policies and training around de-escalation and use of force, especially with regard to people of color. What is your perspective on whether any changes are needed in the ways Madison police operate in our community?
Sure. So I do want to first start and say that we have an incredible police department. As interim Alder, I've spent a lot of time watching them and reading their daily blog about the different issues that come up throughout the day. And they spend a lot of time on social services, frankly, than they do on police work, on criminal work. And I very much appreciate that. The OIR report, the consultant report that the city commissioned, is currently being looked at by an ad hoc committee, and I'm looking forward to hearing their recommendations. But I think it's important for our police department to learn from mistakes, just like everybody else does. I'm hopeful that the recommendations from the ad hoc committee that's working both with the police department, the police union, the city attorney's office, will have good recommendations for the council to implement.
There's a perception that Madison's story is a tale of 2 cities, one in which people of color are less likely to experience success. What can be done to ensure that Madison is a community in which all people can thrive?
So I agree with that perception, and it's unfortunate. I mean, the data definitely shows that there are strong disparities in this city, and while certain portions of our community prosper, there are others that aren't. And so I think what's important is for Madison to be investing in programs that help address that, and then constantly look at and make sure that we're putting resources in the right place. And some of those places include supporting our community centers and the different programming that they do. I think our community centers are such a strong piece of our community. I think affordable housing is key, making sure that we have housing for, whether it's obviously housing first, I'm a big proponent of, but just even workforce housing. Market rate is very expensive in Madison, and it keeps rising, and we need to make sure that we're addressing that through our affordable housing fund. And then another big component is transportation. If we can improve our transportation system and make the city more accessible for people to be able to get to their jobs, no matter where they are in the city, without having to do multiple transfers and being close to bus stops, et cetera, I think those are big aspects of making Madison a better place for all.
Thank you. What issue have you identified as being of primary concern to the residents of your district, and how would you approach tackling it?
Sure. So I think the biggest issue right now in our district is flooding. It was an issue before the big August 20th storms that the city experienced. There was a big storm in June, and I think there are key parts of the city key parts of the district that flood on a regular basis. And so August 20th really woke everybody up to that, and parts of the district, got very severe flooding. And so I've been working with the engineering department on different engagement plans. I think it's important to tell people what they can do on their own to better safeguard their house. And I think it's important for us to be looking at our infrastructure and seeing where we can improve and update our infrastructure to better mitigate flooding. And I think another really important thing is actually also looking at our development ordinances. As Madison continues to grow, and the focus now is grow on infill, we need to make sure that developers are developing with flood mitigation in mind as much as possible, and get aggressive with stuff like green roofs and larger detention tanks and stuff of that nature.
The relationship between the council and the mayor appear at times contentious. Is this a problem? And if so, how would you improve the relationship?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely is contentious at times. I think communication is key. I think strong council leadership is key. I think the mayor and the council absolutely should be our partners. We both almost always have the same goal, and so I think it's just important for there to be dialogue between both the council and the mayor. We aren't always going to agree, whoever the mayor is, but I think it's important that each person listens to each other and understands each other's perspective and point of view. And so, I continue to hope to have that dialogue with whoever the mayor is, but I think that's the key is good dialogue.
Thank you. What changes, if any, should be made in how the city approaches major projects, such as the Judge Doyle Square and the public market?
Sure. So, I mean, I think the city does do a good job of learning from their mistakes. It is a little bit disappointing to me to see, for example, some of the mistakes that were made with Judge Doyle Square. So I think it's a good idea for us to obviously, when problems happen with big projects, going back and looking at, what did we do wrong, and maybe even having a process where we have a written report on, okay, here's how we can do it better. I think when the city implemented, recently passed the new comprehensive plan, it really was a model and engagement, and I think we really should be following that model. And what I mean by that is the city worked really hard on engaging different communities, including paying people for participation. That wouldn't normally have been engaged. And so I think the comprehensive plan that the city had worked on is really a good model for us to look at for future public engagement on big projects.
Thank you. What council committees do you want to serve on, and why?
Sure. So I'm on a bunch of committees now as interim Alder. I very much enjoy the Digital Technology Committee. I'm looking forward to that continuing to help bridge the digital literacy gap that we have in our community, as well as see how we can improve citizen engagement through the technology in the city. Board of Public Works has been a really neat experience because you get to really see the projects that keep the city ticking, that developers bring to us, as well as just upgrading public infrastructure. And then I would like to be involved in the Task Force for Government Reform, which is wrapping up their efforts this year. But I've participated in a lot of those meetings, and I'm really interested on how we can get people more engaged in government, whether running for Alder or just participating in meetings.
Thank you. What would you like to say to the viewing audience as we complete the interview?
Sure. I very much have enjoyed my time as Alder since filling the position in August, and I hope to continue to be able to do so. I've enjoyed I do office hours twice a month. Engagement's a really big deal to me. I'm blogging on a regular basis. The IT department provides us excellent blogs. And so I enjoy being out there. I've been knocking on thousands of doors as part of this campaign, and the engagement's just been phenomenal. So that's something that I've done throughout my term, and I hope to continue to do. And then my goal is to focus on the priorities that I hear from the district, which is transportation, flooding, and a fair and equitable Madison. So I'm looking forward to continuing to talk to people about that and continuing to learn what's important to people. And I hope to be able to serve the community for 2 years.
Well, I want to thank Keith Furman for speaking with us and the viewing audience for taking the time to know your candidates. Please vote in this and every election. On behalf of Madison City Channel and the League of Women Voters of Dane County, I thank you for joining us.